Welcome to the dark courtroom. Imagine being accused of stealing a chicken. Not a royal chicken, not a sacred chicken, just an average, feathered protein source. Now imagine that your trial involves being tied up, blindfolded, and thrown into a river. If you sink, you're innocent, congrats, you drown. If you float, you're guilty and get executed. Welcome to the judicial system of feudal Europe, where logic went on vacation and never came back. In the shimmering tapestry of medieval nonsense, few threads are as tightly woven as the concept of justice. But justice, in this time, wasn't blind. Oh no, justice had perfect 20/20 vision and a penchant for drama, superstition, and a twisted sense of fun. The lord of the land was judge, jury, and sometimes executioner. He could sentence you to death because his pig had a bad day. And no, that's not a metaphor. There are actual historical cases of lords making legal decisions based on omens, bad weather, or indigestion. Let's break it down. You, a dirt-smeared peasant, living in a wooden hovel that smells like goat in despair, accidentally let a cow wander into the lord's cabbage patch. You get dragged in front of a makeshift court, which is really just a lord sitting on an overly ornate chair flanked by two sycophantic bailiffs, who look like they eat rocks for breakfast. There's no lawyer, no defense, no script, just you, your trembling knees, and whatever medieval deity you were hoping would intervene. The law books? Non-existent. Precedents? What are those? The closest thing they had to a penal code was whatever mood the feudal lord woke up in. Did his breakfast beer taste off? Someone's getting flogged. Did a peasant look at his daughter for half a second too long? Get the scold's bridle ready. And the best part? The punishments weren't even consistent. The same offense could get you fined one day and burned at the stake the next. It all depended on the celestial alignment of the moon, the thickness of the Lord's hangover, and how entertaining he wanted the morning to be. And then we have the community aspect. Trials weren't private affairs. They were events, public spectacles that people would literally leave chores undone to attend. Imagine your fate being decided while your neighbor chews on stale bread and heckles you from the sidelines. The town crier would announce the proceedings with glee. Come one, come all, to watch Thomas the Miller answer for crime of allegedly winking at a nun. One of the most chilling aspects of feudal justice was its unflinching belief in divine intervention. Instead of evidence and cross-examination, medieval courts went full spiritual panic mode. Why prove your innocence when you can just let God sort it out? Convenient, right? That meant trial by ordeal, where they believed God would miraculously protect the innocent. If you were forced to hold a red-hot iron and your hand blistered, guess what? Guilty. If your skin miraculously healed after a few days, innocent. Until then, please enjoy the medieval equivalent of third-degree burns and tetanus. And let's not forget the sheer theatricality. The executioner, with his blood-crusted axe and leather hood, wasn't just a functionary. He was a performer, a symbol, an ever-present reminder that the system was watching. His presence alone could make a peasant confess to crimes he didn't commit just to avoid the theater of death. The gallows were center stage, and the only ticket you needed to get in was an unfortunate brush with the feudal legal system. But beyond the absurdity and brutality, there's something deeper at play. These courts weren't just about punishment. They were about control, keeping the lower classes in constant fear, reinforcing the divine right of the nobility, making sure that even if you behaved perfectly, your life could still be upended because the moon looked funny last night. Justice wasn't a balancing scale. It was a wrecking ball aimed squarely at anyone without a title. So next time you complain about jury duty, just remember, at least you're not chained to a rock while the entire village watches to see if the river thinks you're a liar. At least you don't have to hold a glowing iron rod to prove you didn't curse a milk cow. At least your judge doesn't also own the land you till, the house you live in, and the food you eat. Perspective, folks. If you're already horrified or mildly amused by this justice system from hell, hit that subscribe button and join us on this dark journey through history. Drop a comment telling us what punishment you'd create if you were a feudal lord. The more ridiculous, the better. Smash that like if you'd rather face a modern judge than medieval waterboarding, and share this video before someone accuses you of sorcery. Trial by ordeal, Deus ex machina. Let's say someone in your village accuses you of stealing a loaf of bread. You know, you didn't do it. Maybe it was Gregor the Grimy, the guy who thinks bathing is a conspiracy. But in feudal Europe, that's not the point. You're now about to participate in one of the most unhinged methods of determining guilt ever invented. The trial by ordeal. Spoiler alert, God is your only defense attorney. The logic was both divine and deranged. The belief that God would actively intervene in physical trials to protect the innocent. Yes, the all-powerful creator of the universe apparently took time out of running the cosmos to make sure your blisters healed properly. If you didn't scream loud enough while your skin sizzled, innocent. If your flesh peeled like roasted garlic, sorry, sinner. Let's start with the classic. Ordeal by fire. Picture this. You're handed a red-hot iron bar and told to walk 3 paces holding it. Just 3 little steps. Easy, right? Oh, and then your hand is wrapped in linen and locked away for 3 days. When they unwrap it, if it's a grotesque, festering horror show, congratulations. You're guilty and probably headed for the gallows. If it miraculously shows signs of healing, well done. God likes you today. The cruelty wasn't just in the burn. It was in the waiting, the suspense. The entire village buzzing with gossip about your charred hand. Children whispering, elders shaking their heads. The church watching, because this wasn't just about crime. This was about morality, community, and social control. Next up, ordeal by water, or as I like to call it, the original swim test. They tied you up and chucked you into a river. If you sank, God accepted you. Yay, innocence. Also, you drowned. If you floated, that meant the devil kept you buoyant. Guilty. Cue the angry mob. There was no concern for physics, body composition, or the fact that terrified people often flail. If your body refused to sink like a stone, you were toast. It was baptism meets roulette meets public humiliation. And let's not forget ordeal by cold water, where the accused was made to retrieve a stone from the bottom of a cauldron of boiling water. Hand gets cooked, bandaged, and left for 3 days. Again, if it heals miraculously, you live. If it looks infected, the executioner sharpens his tools. Pro tip: medieval hygiene and healing don't mix. Almost everyone got infected. It's a miracle anyone was ever declared innocent. This was more than justice. It was a public spectacle. Entire communities gathered to watch these ordeals. It was religious theater, social reinforcement, and grotesque entertainment all rolled into one. Some villagers brought snacks. Others brought stones. Children were taught that God's justice could be seen in wounds and welts. And if you happened to survive, it wasn't over. You were marked, a miracle survivor, yes, but also a pariah. Let's take a real-life example. St. Joan of Arc. Although her trial was more judicial than ordeal-based, it was soaked in the same logic. Her accusers believed divine signs should reveal her guilt or innocence. The judges weren't looking for facts. They were looking for reasons to prove she was a heretic and torture her into confessing. She was burned not just because she defied England, but because her survival up to that point was too miraculous. Divine irony in full display. Now, let's throw you in this nightmare. You're accused of petty theft. No witnesses, no fingerprints. Just one jealous villager who saw you eyeing the bread stand too long. The court decides, ordeal by fire. You hold the iron. Your skin bubbles. You cry. 3 days later, the priest peels back the bandage with all the subtlety of a butcher. The wound is worse. You're guilty. The crowd nods. Justice has been served. What lesson did we learn? That heat and human skin don't mix. Revolutionary. So next time your printer jams and you think life is unfair, remember this. At least your innocence doesn't depend on third-degree burns and divine favoritism. If this chapter made your skin crawl, literally, click that subscribe button before someone accuses you of bread theft. Drop a comment with the most ridiculous trial idea you can think of. Winner gets imaginary immunity from medieval prosecution. Smash the like if you'd rather face a parking ticket than a cauldron of boiling water. And share this with that friend who always says, I was born in the wrong era. Really, Kevin? Were you? Justice for sale. Nobers jogum. Pulbers apodrisum. Let's talk about something feudal society pretended didn't exist. Money, because when it came to justice, the scales weren't just tipped. They were sold wholesale to the highest bidder. In the great theatrical farce that was medieval law, guilt wasn't a matter of truth. It was a matter of, well, status, and how many goats you could bribe the bailiff with. In theory, feudal law was guided by divine will and noble honor. In practice, it was the Wild West with extra incense and more velvet robes. Lords acted as local judges, not because they were wise, but because they were rich and owned the land. And justice, like land, was theirs to distribute or deny. If you were a serf, you could be hanged for poaching a rabbit. If you were a noble, you could stab a man during Sunday Mass and get a stern talking to and a gobble of wine. Let's paint the scene in painful detail. The Lord's hall smells like old sweat, moldy bread, and the faint hope of mercy. The accused, a hunched peasant named Ewan, kneels in a corner, wringing his cap. Around him, the villagers whisper, some curious, others grateful it's not their turn today. The Lord, Baron Reginald, slouches on a chair upholstered in what might have once been velvet, picking meat from his teeth with a dagger. He raises a brow lazily. Ewan the cobbler. The bailiff announces, charged with theft of 3 apples and insolence during prayer. The room chuckles. Apples? Really? But the bailiff continues with grim determination, as if announcing high treason. Ewan stammers a defense. He was hungry. His daughter was sick. No one listens. Then comes a moment of price. What can you offer for your innocence? Ewan pulls out a ragged pouch, 3 coins, a carved wooden trinket, and half a loaf of bread. The Baron snorts. Guilty, he says, waving a hand. 20 lashes and 1 pig from his household. If he has one. That's it. No trial. No inquiry. Just a performance of power. Justice here wasn't blind. It had a monocle, a wine stain, and a deep hatred for the working class. It wasn't just bribery. It was institutional corruption sanctified by divine narrative. Nobles had the privilege of peers, meaning they could only be judged by other nobles. Translation, an exclusive club of impunity. It's like being tried by your fraternity brothers for burning down the university library. They'll probably hand you a medal. If a noble committed murder, especially against a commoner, they might pay a guild, a man price, a fine for taking a life. Imagine paying a parking ticket for homicide. But for peasants, justice was a meat grinder. Sentences were harsh, immediate, and life-ruining. And the cherry on top, you often had to pay for your own execution. Rope cost money, after all. Let's take a walk into sumptuary laws. These were actual legal mandates, saying what you could and couldn't wear based on your class. Did your tunic look a little too silk-like? Enjoy a flogging for social climbing. Peasants were expected to look miserable, not just be miserable. Even joy was policed. Now meet real-life case study. John of Leicester, a peasant accused of illegal fishing on the Baron's land. He caught 3 fish to feed his starving children. He was tried, fined beyond his means, had his fishing gear confiscated, and was sentenced to a week in the stocks. During this time, his children starved. But hey, the river was safe. Meanwhile, Lord Hugh Fitzsimmons, known for frequent hunting accidents involving peasants, once impaled a tenant farmer while drunk jousting through a vineyard. His punishment? He funded a new stained glass window at the church. Charity, they called it. If you were a woman, double injustice. A nobleman's word outweighed yours. Accusations of promiscuity, witchcraft, or defiance could land you in the pillory or worse. Entire villages would join in the shaming. There was no appeal, no voice, no mercy, just mud, blood, and the crushing silence of injustice. So what if it were you? You, a 14th century peasant named Auric, accused of stealing turnips. Again, you produce 3 coins, pray cry. The Lord laughs. Sentence, 10 lashes, a fee, and 2 weeks in the pillory. Your children hide behind your wife's skirts, terrified. The turnips were spoiled anyway. Meanwhile, Sir Geoffrey tramples a shepherd while hunting and is thanked for donating a bell to the church. Sounds ridiculous? Replace lord with executive, serf with gig worker, and you'll feel the feudal chill in modern air-conditioned courtrooms. So next time someone says we've come a long way, Remember that justice used to depend on how many hens you owned, and ask yourself if today's system is really all that different. Outraged yet? Hit that subscribe button before your modern-day landlord accuses you of tax sorcery. Drop a comment about which modern privilege you think would have made you a medieval noble. Smash that like if you think goats should never be used as currency for innocence. And share this video before someone finds you for wearing sneakers in court. The village's favorite show, executions as entertainment. Picture this. It's a bright spring morning in a sleepy medieval village. Birds chirp, children chase chickens, and the local baker's sweat smells faintly of regret. Suddenly, the town crier marches into the square and bellows, "Execution at noon! Bring your families." Immediately, the marketplace buzzes. Stalls close. Ale barrels roll. Mothers grab their kids. It's showtime. Executions weren't just about justice. They were the Super Bowl of suffering, the public theater of terror, and the social glue that held terrified peasants together. Imagine a grotesque picnic where the snacks are stale bread, the wine is watered down, and the main event is someone losing their head. Entertainment medieval style. The method of execution wasn't just punishment. It was curated horror. Public hangings were the most common, a simple, economic solution to crime. But there was an art to it. Executioners, often paid by the job, became minor celebrities. They practiced techniques to prolong the spectacle. Some were so skilled they could make a hanging last several minutes, each agonizing breath a reminder to the crowd, behave, or this could be you. A good executioner was part craftsman, part sadist, and part stage performer. He might wear a hood, carry a customized axe, or offer a final blessing with the same hands that would end your life. Children idolized them. Criminals feared them. Lords respected them. Villagers whispered about them. In some towns, they had their own homes, isolated from the community, like rock stars of doom. Then came the gallows upgrade. Hanging, drawing, and quartering, a punishment for high treason so elaborate it bordered on performance art. First, the condemned was stripped, tied to a wooden hurdle, and dragged through the streets. The crowd jeered through spoiled cabbage, sometimes rocks. Children ran alongside the cart, laughing. Once at the scaffold, the victim was hanged until almost dead, then cut down, disemboweled while conscious, genitals removed and burned before their eyes. Finally, limbs were hacked off and shipped around the region like postal warnings. 1 foot for Dover, 1 arm for York. No refunds. The execution ground was sacred and profane. Families arrived hours early. Merchants sold ale, sausages, and candied nuts. Some towns even had souvenir vendors selling tiny effigies of condemned or charms allegedly made from their hair. Minstrels sang ballads mocking the crimes. A well-timed scream from the scaffold brought gasps and cheers, like a perfect scene in a tragedy. The more violent the end, the louder the applause. Let's not forget burning at the stake, the fire and faith special. Stakes were erected days in advance, were meticulously stacked. Pitch and fat-soaked kindling ensured the fire would crackle bright and loud. Priests often gave final sermons, ensuring the crowd understood this was about salvation. Someone else's fiery death meant your moral safety. Heretics, witches, apostates, anyone who challenged a religious order was fair game. A woman accused of midwifery without permission might find herself bound, doused, and lit like a human torch, while parishioners prayed for divine order to be restored. Screams were common. Silence was terrifying. Some victims chanted prayers. Others cursed the sky. All burned. Take Marjorie Baxter, who in the 15th century was accused of reading the Bible privately, a crime for which she was burned alive. Her screams were said to echo off the church walls. Local legend claimed her ashes mixed with the wind brought bad harvests. Did that stop people from watching the next one? Absolutely not. For lesser crimes, there was a pillory or the stocks. Days spent immobilized, exposed to weather, insults, and any thrown object the crowd could find. Spoiled eggs, feces, dead animals. It was a buffet of degradation. Often people were left without food or water. Some died of exposure, infection, or trauma. And yet, for the audience, it was an afternoon outing. Now, picture yourself, a 13th century baker named Ansel. You've been accused of short-waiting loaves. You plead your case. No one cares. You're locked in the stocks. Rain falls. Children throw clumps of wet hay. A dog urinates nearby. An old woman calls you a devil. The crowd laughs. Later, your bakery is vandalized. But hey, the townsfolk had a good laugh. Executions weren't just deterrents. They were morality plays. The condemned represented chaos. Their death was catharsis. The public was reminded that order existed and that it had teeth. Execution styles varied like cuisine. France had its guillotine precursors. Spain preferred purification by fire. England layered horror upon horror. Germany loved the breaking wheel. Bones shattered one at a time. Russia? Don't even ask. They once impaled a man and let gravity do the rest. So, next time someone tells you medieval folks were simpler times, remember these were communities that made barbecue human sacrifice a family affair. If this chapter made you gasp, grimace, or question humanity, hit that subscribe button before the town crier accuses you of moral heresy. Drop a comment about which execution method you think would make the worst reality TV show. Smash that like if you prefer courtroom drama over mob justice. And share this before someone ties you to a stake for liking cats too much. Women, witches, and the worst sentences. In the medieval judicial circus, no one had a front row seat to suffering quite like women. While men were flogged, burned, or disemboweled for theft, treason, or heresy, women often face a unique cocktail of punishment, humiliation, and misogyny marinated in superstition and fear. Being born female in the feudal age was basically a lifelong sentence to suspicion, control, and socially sanctioned torment. The logic was simple and horrifying. Women were seen as inherently more sinful, more deceptive, and more in need of surveillance. Eve ate the apple? Boom. Every woman after that got spiritually side-eyed. So if a woman dared to speak too loudly, live alone, possess knowledge of herbs, or just have an opinion, she was halfway to the stake. Let's begin with the witch hunts. While they peaked in later centuries, the foundation was laid solidly in the feudal period. Midwives, healers, and widows were prime targets. Knowledge of medicine? Witch. Independent income? Witch. Lived past menopause? Definitely a witch. Accusations could be based on dreams, livestock deaths, or simply being disliked by someone with influence. Once accused, escape was nearly impossible, and torture was the path to confession. Torture devices had a special flair for women. Enter the scold's bridle, a hideous iron muzzle locked over the head and mouth, with a tongue-pressing spike designed to cut speech, and the tongue itself. This was for gossips, nags, and any woman who voiced discontent. She was paraded through town like a cursed carnival float. Children laughed. Men nodded approvingly. A warning to all others. Silence is safety. Then there was a ducking stool, a wooden lever mechanism perched over a riverbank or pond. The accused was tied to the end and plunged repeatedly into freezing water. Each submersion was met with roaring approval from the townsfolk. The longer she held her breath, the more suspicious she became. They claimed it was a test of purity. In truth, it was medieval synchronized drowning. Consider the punishment for adultery, real or imagined. A man might receive a fine or sideways glance. A woman? She could be flogged publicly, have her head shaved, locked in a cage hung from a gate, or worse, branded with an iron on the forehead or cheek. Her body became the billboard of her alleged sin. In some places, she'd be forced to wear a collar with bells so others could hear her shame approaching. Even childbirth could be a capital crime. If a woman gave birth outside marriage, she was immediately suspect. If the child died, a tragically common occurrence, she could be accused of infanticide. And the punishments? Crushing beneath stones, burying alive, public flogging followed by exile. No mercy, no midwife, no reprieve. Let's not forget the unique brand of medieval gaslighting that came with charges of witchcraft. A birthmark? Proof of a pact with Satan. A miscarriage? Sorcery. A nightmare your neighbor had? Evidence. The sheer absurdity of the accusations was rivaled only by the theatrical cruelty of the punishments. Women were stripped, inspected, shaved, pricked with needles, and then paraded in shame before any formal trial began. Take the case of Agnes Waterhouse, accused in 1566 of sorcery and consorting with a demonic cat named Satan. Her trial was built on the testimony of children and her own confession, likely under duress. The cat, a black and white tabby named Sadhon, allegedly meowed her evil commands. Both were executed. Because in feudal logic, if your cat's name rhymes with bad, you're guilty. Now imagine yourself in this hellscape. You're Elsbeth, a 14th century herbalist. You've delivered 3 babies this season, treated old Morex gout with a paste of garlic and wine, and dare to tell the parish priest that moon phases might affect bleeding. Then a goat dies. A child gets fever. You're summoned, tied, dunked. Your hair freezes to your cheeks. The village watches as you struggle for air. They murmur prayers, some for you, some against. You sink, innocent, also dead. Women weren't just punished for actions. They were punished for existing inconveniently. Too loud, too smart, too independent. Their punishment wasn't just physical. It was cultural erasure, a systemic cleansing of autonomy, identity, and intellect. In modern terms, this legacy mutates into digital witch hunts, victim blaming, and society still obsessed with regulating women's voices and choices. The torture devices are gone, but their ideological descendants remain. So next time someone calls a woman emotional, hysterical, or yes, witchy, remember that once upon a time, that was all it took to end her life. If this chapter made your blood boil, hit that subscribe button before someone accuses you of moon magic. Drop a comment honoring a woman in history who defied the odds. Smash that like if you think herbology isn't a crime, and share this video before a goat dies mysteriously in your village. Medieval curses that still linger. Harankas judiciaries. Let's fast forward 8 centuries. No more lords in velvet robes or ducking stools dangling over ponds. No more pillories in town squares or barons demanding pigs for penance. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The ghosts of feudal justice never left. They just put on a tie, updated their legal jargon, and sat behind polished desks. Today, we no longer drag people through the streets or tie them to the stake. We drag them through bureaucratic hell and tie them to legal debt, court delays, and algorithmic judgment. We don't call it execution. We call it eviction, incarceration, or a ruined record. It's justice by paperwork, not pitchforks. The idea of punishment over rehabilitation? Straight out of the feudal handbook. The prioritization of property over human rights? Feudal as hell. The disproportionate power of the wealthy in legal outcomes? That's not a modern bug. It's a medieval feature dressed in business casual. Let's talk about trial by influence. Just like the nobility who never face true consequences, today's elites often escape accountability. Corporate leaders who pollute rivers receive fines smaller than their yacht maintenance bills. Celebrities accused of violent crimes get rehab and a talk show redemption arc. Meanwhile, a teen caught shoplifting snacks faces jail because he can't afford bail. Collective punishment also got a makeover. In medieval times, a whole village could suffer if one serf defied the Lord. Today, entire zip codes are over-policed, denied services, and algorithmically flagged as high risk. Entire school districts are criminalized because of demographics, not behavior. Look at modern prisons. Mass incarceration is the feudal dungeon industrialized. Prison labor is today's version of serfdom. Underpaid, underprotected, and conveniently invisible. True crime media and court live streams satisfy the same public bloodlust, once quenched by gallows. Social media has perfected digital pillories. Public shaming goes viral. Doxing replaces denunciation. Cancel culture? A mob with better lighting. We've digitized the stocks and outsourced the Rotten Tomatoes to a global audience. Even lawmaking reflects the medieval hierarchy. Lawmakers insulated from the laws they pass. Judges swayed by campaign donations. Legal jargon that alienates the poor and empowers the elite. The court is still a castle, just with fluorescent lights and a metal detector. Consider the case of Caliph Browder, imprisoned for 3 years without trial for allegedly stealing a backpack. He spent over 700 days in solitary confinement. He never saw a jury. He was never convicted. This is a modern equivalent of being chained in a dungeon and forgotten. Proof that the system isn't broken. It's functioning as designed for the wrong people. Meanwhile, corporate crimes are processed like parking tickets. Environmental destruction, labor abuse, financial fraud, resolved with settlements that don't admit guilt, don't change behavior, and don't compensate victims. Feudal lords collected fines. Modern lords sign NDAs. Let's not forget the bail system, medieval in spirit. It punishes the poor for being poor. Plea bargains, coerced by fear of harsher sentences, mirror the medieval confessions extracted under the threat of fire. Mandatory minimums are today's one-size-fits-all acts. And what if it were you? You're accused of fraud by mistake. A database glitch. You lose your job, can't pay rent, miss your court date because the notice went to the wrong address. A warrant is issued. Suddenly, you're criminalized. Not because you're guilty, but because the machine never stops and it never apologizes. This is why we revisit the past, not to romanticize it, but to expose how much of it still lives in our shadows. The dungeons were made of stone. Ours are made of silence, software, and systemic neglect. Justice didn't evolve. It mutated. So the next time someone insists we progressed, remind them, the bear may be gone, but his desk got an upgrade. If this chapter made you rethink modern justice, hit that subscribe button before the algorithm brands you as heretical. Drop a comment with a legal absurdity you think reeks of medieval vibes. Smash that like if you've ever felt small in courtroom, and share this video so more people can spot the feudal ghosts haunting our laws. If you think your HOA is bad, let's wrap this glorious descent into feudal madness with a reminder. Power didn't disappear. It just got a newsletter and started enforcing grass height restrictions. The Homeowners Association, your friendly neighborhood inquisition, is the spiritual descendant of the feudal court system. They've traded swords for bylaws, but the energy? Exactly the same. Imagine the scene, a pristine suburban cul-de-sac where ornamental bushes must be exactly 24 inches high. A rogue homeowner paints their mailbox a rebellious shade of slate plum. The HOA convenes. There's a hearing, a fine, a threat of lien. Somewhere, a medieval baron applauds from the afterlife. HOAs are the modern microthrones of power. Unelected mini-lords wielding clipboards, roaming neighborhoods with righteous indignation and a camera phone. They write decrees about shutters, fences, and Halloween decorations as if preserving the realm from chaos. Like barons of old, they rule by fiat, enjoy immunity, and love to say, it's in the charter, but they're not alone. Look around. The echoes of petty feudal power are everywhere. School boards that micromanage student socks. Workplace compliance officers who discipline for off-brand social media posts. City councils that outlaw lemonade stands. Every layer of society is riddled with rules that exist not for justice, but for control. Take, for example, your job. Your boss mandates business casual Fridays, but bans sandals. Your report is returned because you used the wrong shade of blue in your pie chart. Now recall medieval script scribes punished for using improper colors in royal records. Coincidence? Only if you ignore 800 years of bureaucratic creep. Or consider apartment complexes with pet policies. Dogs must be under 25 pounds, non-shedding, and emotionally neutral. Sound familiar? It's the sumptuary laws of fur and barking. In 1297, you couldn't wear purple unless you were nobility. In 2025, your corgi needs a character reference. Let's push it further. Imagine being fined $500 for trimming your hedge on a non-approved day. You attend the HOA meeting. 5 smug faces stare from behind folding tables. You plead. They quote Clause 13.4b. You lose. Justice is spoken. Now picture yourself in 1350. You're summoned to the manor court for harvesting barley a day early. The reeve cites lunar alignment. Your punishment? A week without ale and 1 goat sacrifice of the feast. Again, different robes, same rot. The feudal mindset survives because it's efficient. A handful of people get to feel powerful. The rules are enforced with religious fervor. The community is conditioned to obey not out of logic, but out of fear of exclusion, fines, or embarrassment. We laugh at the absurdity, but the implications are serious. These small tyrannies condition us to accept bigger ones. If you tolerate absurd control over your garbage bins, you're less likely to resist injustice in your paycheck or your privacy rights. So what do we learn? That power doesn't need swords or thrones. It just needs a policy manual and a laser printer. That modern order often values appearances over ethics, and that even in a democracy, the spirit of the baron still lingers, sometimes in khakis, sometimes with a clipboard, always with a smug sense of divine right. If this final chapter made you laugh, rage, or triple-check your mailbox color, hit that subscribe button before your HOA accuses you of violating the cosmic fence law. Drop a comment with the most absurd modern rule you've ever faced. Smash the like if you've suffered under petty bureaucracy, and share this series to help others recognize that feudalism didn't die. It just learned to excel